Over the last week in Capel, big changes in the weather department. Lots of rain, and lots of cold and wind. Outside of Capel, more severe weather. Welcome to Meteorology at CISD 2020.
Hello students, my name is Mr. W and I'm the Director of Science here in Capel ISD. I'm also the District Chief Meteorologist, which means it is my pleasure to be here with you today to talk about the weather and to listen to some of your observations, feelings, and experiences about the weather over the past couple of weeks. I also look forward to kind of tying it together with what you've been learning about in your science classes. So we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get started.
Okay, to start us out, I want to talk to you a little about your memories, actually, of some of the weather that you were experiencing over the last couple of weeks. Think a lot about what you have written down in your weather logs, some of those memories and some of those feelings, some of those observations that you made, and then also try to think about some of the things you've been learning in class as well. And I'm going to definitely go into a little of that as we go through the rest of this video. And also remember what the measurements, while you're making the measurement or thinking about it, what did it make you feel like? Because a lot of times observations of weather are things that you can sense directly just by being there. So think about some of those feelings that you had and what the weather generally felt like on days that you had done your observations. So we're going to go way back. This is Friday, October the 23rd. So this is kind of when it was still summer here. Let's be honest, that was a while ago. So we're going to kind of look at the maps that you've been seeing in class, and then we're going to take a look at how the temperatures changed over time too. So first, these maps are made by basically a computer over at the Weather Channel. They're okay, but the computers kind of get a little crazy when they make these maps. If you look, there's like a whole bunch of H's all over the place, but no L's. So sometimes it makes some mistakes, and basically I can kind of piece it together for you a little bit. I'm going to use the little pen, and we're going to write on the screen here, because there's actually a low pressure up here near the Great Lakes. I'm going to kind of color it in a little bit. So there are low pressures, and it just happens to not have really done a good job of capturing it. There's another one way out here over the Atlantic Ocean. So just kind of keep that in mind. But over Texas, we were really about to experience at least a change. And so I'm going to put a little arrow right here. There's a big blue line with some triangles attached to it that's about to move through Texas. And if you're not sure where we are in Texas, we're kind of like right about here where this red dot is. So, and so that blue line with the triangles on it, I think you've all learned by now, it's a cold front. And that cold front, because of the way the teeth are pointing, it's actually headed kind of on your screen towards the lower right. So it's heading toward the southeast. And that means this front is actually moving towards us here in Texas. So let me just get rid of that arrow. And I'm going to say that front is headed in this direction. So, this, if you remember a couple weeks back on the 23rd, this was a Friday. It was actually kind of a nice day at that point. And then things started to change rapidly during the day, and there was some rain showers around and some actual thunderstorms going on in certain areas too. A couple other things to notice about this map is there are these little white lines, and I'm going to circle a whole bunch of them right here. So they are another thing you might have been learning about in class, and basically it's kind of like a contour line that you would do if you're drawing a map of elevation, but instead of elevation, these actually mean pressure. So different values of pressure are around or labeled along those lines. And so we have high pressures and we have low pressures, and each of them are surrounded by these kind of these circular areas. So up near Canada and Montana, this is a contour line for a very high pressure. There's definitely some high pressure areas in there. And then over the Atlantic over here and up in kind of where Michigan and Wisconsin are. There's another isobar right there. I just gave it away. It's called an isobar. It's contour line for pressure. So that would be a very low one. These ones over here next to this low in the Atlantic Ocean, they'd be very low pressure too. And hopefully you kind of remember some of the things you learned about isobars and pressure is when you have a lot of them in a small area like we do in this map, heading towards Texas, that means one thing: very, very windy conditions. So I want you to think about that. And if you remember, if you wrote in your log on that Friday, back on October 23rd, were there a lot of high winds that day? And I think the answer is yes. So kind of an interesting day, and definitely a map like this shows us some of those things that you were actually feeling by looking at what those isobars are doing. One more thing I want to talk about. As that front was coming through, and I'm going to get my red pen back out here, as it was coming through, it was actually creating not just the wind, but the wind blows in a certain direction, and that's important. And these isobars can actually help you, that combined with the H's and the L's on the map, what way are the winds going? So around a high pressure, winds kind of flow and I'm drawing many arrows here, in a clockwise direction, okay? So right where we are in Texas, where our little red dot is, the winds are kind of going from that high pressure, they're going away from it and in a kind of a clockwise turn. And actually at some point they start to kind of turn so they go along the isobars, slightly different, but not too far off those isobars. So we were about to get a lot of winds coming from a certain direction. And I'm going to just write the word north up here. So up in Canada, and you can see my terrible handwriting here. It's a lot of fun when you're using a mouse to write. That north direction has a lot of cold air up in Canada and up in northern United States, and that wind was dragging it down along these isobars into Texas. So I really want you to take careful note of that, because that's going to play out a couple of times in our little talk here today. The other thing is over by our low pressure in the Great Lakes there, that actually, let's see here, let's try to do this again. Sometimes it won't let me erase or change color. So winds were actually around a low pressure, they go the other direction. So they kind of go counterclockwise and in towards the low pressure. And they do, again, sort of start to flow along those isobars. So basically, if you were living in Indiana, you're getting a nice light southerly breeze, which brings in and up into Pennsylvania, West Virginia. So you're actually probably warming up. And if you use the high pressure here, again, the winds are going clockwise around that. So it's all saying one thing. The winds in that part of the country are kind of a southerly or southwesterly wind, which means that they were probably having a nice day, getting kind of warm, which is the complete opposite of what we were about to experience here in Texas. So I'm going to skip forward a day, and we're going to watch this map change. And that whole area of fronts and all that weather that was over Texas all moved off very quickly. But we were left in it was a very cold day, and we'll look at temperatures in just a minute. And it was so cold, snow started to break out up into the central parts of the country, like Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, as you can see that blue stuff there. And notice over Texas, we still have, we now have more L's than we had before. So the computer kind of caught it this time and said, oh, well, I guess there was a lower pressure there. And that's going to play out in the next couple of slides here as you watch. It actually develops into a cold front. And we got a second cold front, and this is sort of along Sunday into Monday. And man, this one really got our attention also. So we kind of flopped around in the temperature department and the weather that weekend. And then by Sunday and Monday, this is the 26th, which is Sunday of October, we had gotten another cold front, and things were rapidly changing here again here in Texas. So. And you can notice too, there's some more snow on the map. So Canada was really kind of throwing, if you do that kind of clockwise and outward away from the high pressure, Canada was really bringing in lots and lots of cold air. So one of the little things I want to kind of do on this particular map is how do you remember what way winds go around high and low pressure? Well, think about in your house or in your classroom, where do you have to look to find the clock? Where is it usually located? And the clock that tells time. And that's usually like up on the wall, so up above your head, maybe over a door or something like that. And so the way I remember winds going kind of clockwise around high pressure is that clocks are usually high above your head. So think about that. So clocks are high, and then for low pressure, that's counterclockwise. Well, think about the countertop. If you're standing up in your kitchen or in your bathroom, where's the countertop? Well, it's lower than your head is, or the upper part of your body. So counters are actually lower. So counterclockwise, lower pressure. So if you look at some of these low pressures, the winds were going kind of around in a counterclockwise way, and we talked a lot about that. So just kind of a little way to remember that if you're having trouble. So now we move into Monday, and that cold front kind of went way through Texas. It went all the way into Mexico, into the Gulf of Mexico. It cleared out through Louisiana and Mississippi. So this one was really, really, really intense. And on the back side of that, we had a lot of cold air. And so what we started to notice is more precipitation started to really get going here on Monday, the 26th. Okay. And then by Tuesday, again, those fronts kept on trudging southward, somewhat stalling out. They can only go so far at this time of year because it's still pretty warm down in Mexico and the Gulf. But we started to notice a lot of pinks, purples, and blues showing up over Texas here. I'm going to circle that area. And again, if you're not sure where we are, we were in this little dot right here. But so lots of kind of that pink and purple stuff is ice. So things like sleet and freezing rain, it's mixed with some snow, and then there was some blue snow areas. So lots of bad weather was happening on that day in certain parts of, even in Texas, but certainly across the country. So moving along into Wednesday, the computer went a little crazy with H's again. Most of that precipitation on the 28th, which is Wednesday, had cleared out, but you'll probably remember some of your observations on those days. It wasn't really raining, but it was doing something really funny. It was kind of, we call it drizzle, where it just kind of mists out. There was lots of really, really tiny little drops of water just kind of hanging out, and you would see that kind of building up on cars and grass. And then on Thursday, finally, it started to clear, or not clear out, but it definitely stopped drizzling and it stopped raining. Still kind of cloudy, but that's kind of the weather story that happened in terms of the fronts. And you can see, by the way, that storm that we got really blew up over the eastern part of our country. So it's headed up into the northeast towards Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, all that. And the low pressure is really starting to get strong, and that counterclockwise motion of wind around it was picking up as well, because I see a lot more isobars around that low. And so look at all the rain that they picked up, and there's another reason that there's so much rain there. We're going to talk about that because it got a little boost from something else that made more rain that day. The other thing I want to talk about is over Texas, if you either go clockwise around the high pressure or counterclockwise around the low, no matter what way you do it, we're still getting northerly winds, and I still see quite a few isobars over us. So I'm guessing that it was still kind of breezy that day, and then we're coming from the north, and it probably didn't feel all that great on Thursday. So if you did some observations, you might know it was still feeling pretty cold and breezy that day. Some quick kind of, before we go into what the temperatures did, it's pretty cool to watch. What does a cold front look like when it goes over? And I actually took this picture myself, not this year, but it was last year. And this is what a cold front looked like the day it was coming over. And it was very similar to the ones that we've gotten recently, where it dropped really, really sharply in temperature behind it. And if you look up, these are two different pictures. There's kind of a really dark cloud, and it's sort of saggy and low to the ground. And you'll see a lot of even almost looks like rising motion, or the cloud is like getting pushed up into the air. And that was what the cold front might actually look like. And it's a place where air is rapidly rising. So that's because you have cold air coming in. And what does cold air do? It kind of stays along the ground. It behaves like a wedge, whereas warm air is less dense and it really rises up into the atmosphere when cold air hits it. So you get a lot of swirling motions and lots of rising air. So let's talk about temperatures really quick and kind of go into that and how they were throughout the last couple of weeks here. So again, going back to Friday the 23rd, this was when summer was still happening around here. But you can see over Texas, this is Dallas, and the airport is 74 degrees. And then up in Montana and up towards Canada, there was some really strange colors showing up and lots of blues around it. And that's indicative of very cold air. So it was already, there were signs that big changes were starting to happen already. And notice it was 1 degree. I think that's maybe Billings, Montana. Horrible day there. Okay, so it was 74. Then we go to, this is Friday the 23rd, so way back. Then we moved to Saturday. And you can see we were 50 degrees that changed to in a very short amount of time. So it was starting to get cold, and that blue temperature area is starting to invade North Texas. And it's still, you're seeing lots of cool temperature readings up in the northern part of the country still. And then it started to really, we had a little bit of a transition day. It got a little bit better for just a minute. And then Canada really opened up and started to push. This is actually, I went from Sunday to late Sunday, so you could already see the push of air moving down into Texas. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And this is kind of going from nighttime to daytime. It didn't even go up on Wednesday at all. It hit maybe 40, 42 degrees, and that was it. And then finally by Thursday on the 29th, it actually got a little bit better in terms of temperatures, but it was still pretty chilly out there. That's the day I said it was probably pretty breezy. So that being said, I'm going to go back a couple slides, and I want you to kind of look at how you can use, and we talk about keynote animations and animating things. Well, if you actually use an animation tool, you can actually see how things are moving, and you can actually make predictions based on what you see happening. So watch. And I'm going to pull those circles off. Watch the change. And you can almost see the air is almost flowing over the last couple of weeks. And it's moving like it's almost like a liquid. And I want you to understand that that's exactly what it's doing. It's behaving just like a fluid. So I'll go back one more time. Gotta go all the way back this time. So watch the flow of that cold air just driving southward into the country and taking over. And you can see it kind of expanding and growing. Now, as we got towards Wednesday the 28th and Thursday the 29th, you know, the fact is that we still get some sunshine in this country at this time of year, and it was able to what we call modify that cold air. It started to warm it up just a little bit, and it kind of dissipated in its intensity. But boy, was it chilly when it first came down. Okay, and I will say, if you recall some of the days where we're getting that rain and that drizzle, it was a wild time. And over for us in October, if you look at, this is a map of the whole United States, but again, we're somewhere right about here in Dallas, red dot here, right of the Metroplex there. All around us, there were winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. The nice dark purple color right in here, that was actually an ice storm warning that day for those places in the country. And so I just wanted you to realize, for this time of year to have that kind of weather already in Texas, that is pretty interesting, pretty unusual. We set a couple of record low high temperatures, meaning in the past for I think it was Wednesday and Thursday, 27th, 8th, or 28th, 9th, we set the temperature never went up really. So it stayed so cold that it set a record for the high temperature that day of being so cold. So it's pretty interesting. The other thing you're going to notice on this map is a lot of red starting to appear over the Gulf of Mexico. And we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Really quickly, I did want to show you another tool that we have for helping us understand weather and patterns and what to expect. This is what we call radar, and I think you already know probably what that is. It shows you where the rain, the snow, and the ice is happening at the time. And I think this was, back on Monday, you could see a lot of rain and drizzle for us here in Dallas and Fort Worth, but totally different story up in the north parts of Texas and Oklahoma and Nebraska, lots of snow and ice. And a closer look, you can zoom in on that. Here's DFW right there. Lots of showers and drizzle, but it was kind of getting icy out there over the panhandle of Texas. And then this was closer on Tuesday. We had another big surge and lots of Gulf of Mexico moisture got involved here. Lots of ice and snow. It was probably if they were in schools up in Amarillo and maybe over in Midland or Odessa, Texas, if you had friends over there, they probably wouldn't have gone to school that day because the roads were probably really, really, really bad. All right, aside from the weather that's been crazy here in Capel recently, what else do you remember about some strange weather that might have been going on outside our area over the last couple of weeks? And I'm hoping this little symbol down below gives you a little bit of a hint as to what that might be, and you might recognize it actually. And you'll also recognize this when I put that up. So what you are looking at is obviously a very swirly mass of clouds, and I think you can all tell what that is. That is a hurricane, and that is Hurricane Epsilon. And that was going on back around October 23rd and 4th, and actually earlier than that as well. And I wanted you to kind of see what that looked like while it's over the open ocean there. And also, what way is it turning? What way do you see this thing spinning? And I'm hoping you can sort of see that counterclockwise swirl. And if you had to guess, what kind of pressure might that be? And obviously the answer there, if counters are low, that would be a low pressure system. So hurricanes are just really, really, really powerful low pressures. And if I were to draw isobars around a hurricane, there would be a whole lot of them. And Hurricane Epsilon, so this should probably strike you as a little bit odd, is first of all, the name is odd if you haven't noticed that, but this is the 26th named storm we've had this season, which started back in probably around June or July. And the 10th hurricane. So 10 of those named storms have strengthened into hurricanes. So this one peaked out at about a category 3 with 115 mile an hour winds. You can see a little eye in the early part of this that eventually started to fill in. It moved over cold water eventually and started to weaken a little bit. This right there, inside that little red circle, that's right there, is the island of Bermuda, which it actually missed, thankfully, because they've gotten hit pretty hard in the last couple of years. So that was Hurricane Epsilon, a very funny name, which we'll talk about. And there you can see what it kind of did. Again, there's Bermuda, barely missed Bermuda, and this is parts of Canada here. This is Nova Scotia, and this is Newfoundland. So it kind of missed all the land, thankfully, but really you should notice it's kind of survived way up into the Atlantic here. And there's two reasons for that. One is the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream keeps the warm water there, so the hurricane can feed off of that. But also the Gulf Stream and all of the oceans are warmer than ever right now, so it's allowing these storms to last a lot longer. So that wasn't the only one, if you remember. More recently than that one, we had yet another one. So let's see if you can remember the name on this one. And this was what became Hurricane Zeta. So yet another strange, bizarre name. And it was the 27th named storm, and it did become a hurricane also, so that's the 11th one. This one peaked out around category 2, which is a 105 mile an hour wind speed. Same, again, features as all the other hurricanes, counterclockwise spinning and things like that. You'll notice too, while I'm on the topic of hurricanes, the satellite, the picture that you see kind of bounces around a little bit. That's them recentering the camera, basically. So they kind of have to shift so that they can stay focused over the storm. And later on, this one actually sped up quite a bit. This one hit Louisiana. This is the third storm that hit Louisiana. So it's been a busy year over there. Luckily, none of them were super high in category or wind speed, but a lot of rain, a lot of damage, a lot of flooding. And the one thing I want you to kind of watch here, on the left side, this cloud mass seems to be moving very quickly to the right. That is what kind of kicked Zeta a little bit and made it move a whole lot faster, which is a good thing because it actually prevented it from strengthening before it made landfall. Because the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico can really make these hurricanes take off. If they're going slow enough, they can access that energy and really become severe. But the cold front that we got, the latest one, finally pushed through here, and it started to clear out along Thursday, Friday, and that's what really got Hurricane Zeta to take off. And this one eventually went right up on through into the northeast United States. And if you remember back in earlier part of the video, we said, wow, there's a lot of rain suddenly over the eastern part of the United States. Well, that's because Hurricane Zeta kind of injected itself into that cold front and really gave it some extra moisture to work with, which meant they got a ton of rain. So that's how that worked out for them. And just a quick review, I mean, both of those were fairly weak. Zeta was a category 2 at the highest, and Epsilon was a 3. We've had a bunch that were in the 3, 4, 5 range this year. And that's something that we're noticing a lot more of. A lot of these hurricanes are strengthening quickly into category 3s, 4s, and 5s. And I did want to talk about the names because it's kind of funny. The names that they come up with sometimes are funny on their own, but you'll notice there are some letters missing. If you can look really closely, maybe you can guess which ones they are really quick if you sing your ABCs in your head. These were all the storms that we had in 2020, but there are several missing. First of all, you'll notice there's no Q, U, X, Y, or Z names because there just aren't enough names in the alphabet to have those names yearly, because we'd probably use Q quite a bit, obviously, and there aren't that many names that start with Q, actually. So what they do after they run out of letters at W, which was Wilfred this year, they added on, so far, these are the ones they've added on. These are the Greek letters. So we've had alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, and now zeta. So I just wanted you to have a little background on the naming thing and how it can kind of be a little bit funny sometimes. But by the way, we've had a lot of hurricanes this year, and I think that's something you all should kind of keep in the back of your minds. That usually doesn't mean good things in the long haul. All right, so that brings us to the point in our little presentation where you get to put on your meteorologist hat and actually go do some of the data collecting that you've been used to and you've done over the last week or two. And so, and then from there, we can take some of the information that we get today, combine it with what you've learned in class and maybe from this presentation, maybe we can come up with a little forecast for the next day or two. And so whether you're inside or out, inside the classroom or at home, go ahead and go outside. If you can, take some of your measurements like temperature, pressure, humidity, wind direction, speed, if you can estimate that. See what the clouds are doing, how many clouds there are, where they're going, and then if there's any precipitation or anything, to be sure to write that down and record that all in your journals. And I will see you back live in just a few minutes.